Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the opening ceremony of Tadaima, a community virtual pilgrimage. Before we begin, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce you to His Excellency Shinsuke J. Sugiyama, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Japan to the United States of America.
Hello to all of you on the Tadaima virtual pilgrimage. I'm Shinsuke J. Sugiyama. In the 28 months I have been Japan's envoy to the United States, I, together with my late wife Yoko, have experienced many wonderful things. One of the most moving and meaningful events we attended was the Heart Mountain pilgrimage in Wyoming. Pilgrimage is defined as a journey to a sacred place. And those few days we spent in Wyoming truly felt like that. The people I met, the things I learned, it was all quite powerful to my late wife Yoko and me. I wish every Japanese American, as well as every American and every Japanese, could experience a pilgrimage like that. It is really purifying. Since I took up my post here, I've been made a concerted effort to learn and appreciate Japanese American history. Within days of arriving, we went to Los Angeles to visit the Japanese American National Museum and saw the photo of President Reagan signing the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. All of these experiences gave me an impetus to further learn the history of Japanese American. By the way, I wrote a paper recently on this matter in Japanese law book to be published this autumn with focus on its legal aspects. In this process, I reconfirmed not only tireless and heroic efforts of our great leaders, including Secretary Mineta, but also the importance of Americans' courage and generosity in redressing and restating the wrongs of the past. I have so much to learn from history. The history of Japanese Americans shows us that wrongs, as painful as they will forever remain, can be righted. It is important to share and promote the understanding of Japanese American history because it is uplifting. All of you appreciate this. Okage-sama-de. The pandemic this year has prevented in-person pilgrimages to the internment sites, but Tadaima is a way for all of us to still be on the journey together. I hope that many people will be part of this journey and deepen their understanding of Japanese American history. So in concluding, I welcome you to the opening of the Tadaima virtual pilgrimage, and I extend my warmest best wishes to you all.
We appreciate His Excellency's extraordinary support of the Japanese American community and this historical narrative. We thank His Excellency Ambassador Sugiyama for taking the time to share this message with us.
It was on the edge of the wind, the summer day, summer. Memories of the setting sun were just different way to be. When in song you're blessed to hear, mending the ribs of our feet. I answer you, days are end unto the end of the cancer. One day you will follow at the sound of laughter. One day we'll fall in love.
Hello, I'm David Ono.
And I'm Tamlin Tamita. Welcome to Tadaima, a community virtual pilgrimage in a time of social distancing. We are here at the Japanese American National Museum to introduce you to a summer-long celebration. Tadaima is a collaborative effort to bring together the Nikkei community so we can honor our history, engage in cultural activities, and find connection.
But before we get to that, it is worth mentioning the protests that we have all been witnessing or participating in recent weeks. Millions of people across the country are working hard to dismantle 400 years of systemic racial trauma and murder. The Black Lives Matter movement is leading a radical change in policing, community investment, and anti-racism education. Emotionally, it's a lot to process. We are grieving for our Black sisters and brothers while confronting biases in our institutions and in ourselves. However, I think most of us are cautiously optimistic. What makes these reform efforts unique is that they are set against the backdrop of a global pandemic. And as you all know, the pandemic of the novel coronavirus has dramatically changed the way that we live our lives daily, interact with one another, and this means staying home whenever possible, taking precautions when in public, and avoiding crowds. Unfortunately, this also means canceling events, including annual pilgrimages to the World War II incarceration sites.
We want to thank you for virtually joining us today as we commemorate the struggles of the Japanese American community and its resilience during a dark period in our nation's history.
In February 1942, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. This authorized the U.S. Army to exclude all persons of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast. Allowed to bring only what they could carry, people were forced to vacate their homes and abandon their lives as they were removed to some of the most desolate places in the country. In total, over 120,000 Americans of Japanese ancestry were imprisoned without due process of law. Japanese Americans weren't the only ones. Thousands of Japanese Canadians and Japanese Australians were incarcerated in their respective countries. And Japanese Mexicans were ordered to leave their homes on the Pacific coast. Nikkei civilians from a dozen Latin American countries were even deported to the United States and held in camps run by the Immigration and Naturalization Service. The system of confinement facilities in the US was vast and more complicated than most people realize. For this virtual pilgrimage, we hope to expand the traditional narrative. Scholars, artists, educators, and representatives from many different contingents of the community have come together to provide a fuller understanding of Japanese American history.
Rather than 10 separate pilgrimages for each of the camps, Tadaima will combine many of the unique traditions from each site, along with new content that is spread across 9 themed weeks. The virtual pilgrimage will feature pre-recorded and live-streamed content, as well as opportunities to engage with presenters. There will be online exhibits, workshops, performances, lectures, film screenings, and more. So we can all learn, share stories, and build community from the safety of our homes. As an online event, Tadaima poses a unique opportunity to connect not only the Japanese American community, but the global Nikkei community. We hope that these programs can help people find connection in spite of our isolation. Tadaima means I'm home in Japanese. It is our way of acknowledging the unusual circumstances we all find ourselves in as we gather together separately. Tadaima is also a reminder that home is wherever we find support and feel most comfortable.
These are unprecedented times that we find ourselves in. When embracing a loved one can put them at risk, when disease is driving the recovery of the natural world, when a crisis can catalyze positive change, understandably, many of us are left feeling disoriented. Our uncertainty for the future is compounded by the extraordinary political era that we live in. Division is rife, and government response to a health issue has become a controversy. We also live in an era of relentless misinformation, which makes us doubt our own perception of reality. All nations are fighting a global crisis that should unite us, yet it's easy to feel disconnected from the rest of the world. So, let's take this time to breathe and to reflect on our hopes and values. Despite the challenges that we are facing, this is our chance to re-engage with ourselves and to think about who we want to be when this is over.
Let us also say thank you to the helpers, people who are risking their lives to fight against this virus, such as scientists, medical professionals, sanitation workers, and public safety officials. People who provide us with food and necessities, such as groceries, deliveries, factories, and farm workers. People who keep our society functioning, such as the trade specialists who maintain our utilities, the journalists who keep us informed, and the educators and caregivers who provide structure for our children. This pandemic has reminded us of who our greatest assets are. However, it has also magnified our systemic flaws. So let us remember the workers who cannot afford to stay home and the communities who do not have access to food and healthcare. And let us do what we can to protect those who are most at risk for COVID-19, the elderly, the homeless, the incarcerated, and people with disabilities and underlying conditions. During World War II, allies of the Japanese American community reached out to assist families or provide comfort in their time of need. As the camps closed and Japanese Americans picked up their pieces of their lives, they helped each other find jobs, housing, and services. If ever we need a source of inspiration, let us remember our ancestors who set the example over 75 years ago.
We must also remember that reaching out to our neighbors means to ask for help as much as it means to offer it. There is a stigma that needing assistance is a sign of weakness or failure, particularly when it comes to mental health. But that's the purpose of a community, to lift each other up so we can all hope for a brighter tomorrow. It's okay to feel anxious and frustrated and listless, and it's okay to grieve. People have lost their loved ones, their sources of income, their health insurance, their social interactions, and their sense of stability. So for the next few moments, we'd like to honor those losses and all the people who could not be with us today.
무변 세가 Bando Bonno Mujin Seigandan Homom Muryo Seigangak Butsudo Mujo Seiganjo. Tadaima, the Japanese word to announce one's return home, a return to where one belongs. The World War II Japanese-American incarceration experience was a sudden shattering of that sense of home, of belonging, a forced removal from one's home to many different types of confinement sites. Post-war pilgrimages to those sites of dislocation are journeys of remembrance and a way to reclaim a sense of belonging and a sense of home. Today, we begin the 2020 virtual pilgrimage, Tadaima, a journey to remember that which excluded on the basis of race or religion, and the solidarity necessary to regain a sense of belonging. We dedicate the merits of reciting the Shiguseigan by honoring and recalling the names of James Hatsuaki Wakasa, April 1943, 65-year-old Japanese cook, shot by military police sentry whilst taking a walk parallel to the fence at the WRA camp in Topaz, Utah. Together we recall with him, and we honor Ahmaud Arbery, February 2020, 25-year-old unarmed black man shot by vigilantes in a pickup truck while jogging in his neighborhood in Glynn County, Georgia. We recall and honor Tatsuo Ryusei Inoue, December 1943, a 33-year-old Japanese confined in a prison within a prison, enduring a hunger strike within the Tula Lake stockade to protest food shortages and the brutal treatment of community leaders in the Tula Lake concentration camp, California. Together with him, we recall and honor Ronald Umanya, March 2020, 30-year-old immigrant from El Salvador who endured a hunger strike within the ICE detention facilities in Hudson County, New Jersey, demanding toilet paper and soap for immigrant detainees to protect themselves from the COVID-19 virus. We recall and honor Hirota Isomura, July 1942, 59-year-old fisherman forcibly removed from his home in San Pedro, California, shot by U.S. Army Guard, accused of trying to escape the U.S. Army camp, Lordsburg, New Mexico, despite being physically disabled and barely able to walk. We remember him together, and we recall and honor Breonna Taylor, March 2020, 23-year-old African-American emergency medical technician killed in her own bed at her Louisville, Kentucky apartment by police officers who had stormed in without knocking or identifying themselves, striking her with at least 8 shots. We recall and honor Jungo Kino, December 1941, a 65-year-old Japanese garage mechanic shot in Stockton, California, due to rising anti-Japanese vigilantism after the Pearl Harbor attack. We remember him together with our honoring and recalling of Boy Chung, March 2020, a Burmese American father attacked and stabbed in a Sam's Club in Midland, Texas, by a man claiming that Chinese-looking people were spreading the COVID-19 virus. we finally recall and honor Kanesaburo Oshima, May 1942. 58-year-old Japanese store owner shot by guards in the back of the neck at the fence at the Fort Sill internment camp in Oklahoma, leaving behind his wife and 11 children in Kona, Hawaii. We recall him together with George Floyd, May 2020, an unarmed 46-year-old black man and father of 5 children killed by a knee of a police officer on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. His last words, "Mama, please," and I can't breathe. 願わくはこの苦毒をもってあまねく一切に及ぼし、我々と主情と皆共に仏道を上善こと。We have recalled and honored the names of those who have come before us. May they, together with us and all sentient beings, achieve liberation together. Tadaima. As we undertake this pilgrimage, let us discover ourselves and our interlinked histories with many communities. Tadaima. As we undertake this pilgrimage, let us find refuge, come home together.
Concentration Constellation. In this earthly configuration, we have not points of light, but prominent barbs of dark. Begin between the Golden State's highest and lowest elevations and name that location Manzanar. Rattlesnake a line southward to the zone of Arizona, to the home of natives on the reservation and call those Gila, Poston. Then just take your time winding your way across the southwest expanse, the Lone Star State of Texas, gathering up a mess of blues as you meander around the banks of the humid Mississippi. Yes, just make yourself at home in the swamps of Arkansas, for this is Roar and Jerome. By now, you weary of the way. It's a big country, you say. It's a big history, hardly halfway through, with Amachi looming in the Colorado desert, Heart Mountain high in wide Wyoming, Minidoka on the moon of Idaho, then down to Utah's jewel of topaz before finding yourself at Northern California's frozen shore of Tule Lake. Now regard what sort of shape this constellation takes. It sits there like a jagged scar, massive on the massive landscape. It lies there like the rusted wire of a twisted and remembered fence.
After the end of World War II, survivors of the incarceration often referred to something called camp, but were reluctant to describe exactly what it was. Their children were coming of age in the 1960s. They became deeply influenced by the civil rights and anti-war movements that highlighted the decade. Then in 1969, a group of students from Los Angeles set out to find answers. Their journey to the former Manzanar concentration camp became the first of many pilgrimages and kindled a new wave of activism. The Japanese American community organized to demand recognition and redress from the US government, until finally, in 1981, President Carter opened a congressional investigation into the events of World War II. It is concluded that the Nikkei removal and incarceration was not the result of national security, but of race prejudice, war hysteria, and failure of political leadership. In 1988, President Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, offering an official apology and reparations to living survivors of the Japanese American incarceration. Today, the pilgrimage lives on as Japanese Americans gather together to share stories and to heal decades of intergenerational trauma. But even as we remember the past, we keep the future in mind. As new generations of Japanese Americans work to keep this history alive, they continue the tradition of advocacy, serving as allies in new civil rights issues, and reminding the country of what must never happen again to any group.
Pilgrimage means experiencing the power of place, creating community, and reclaiming history.
Pilgrimage is learning something that wasn't in my history books.
Pilgrimage means Tadaima, I'm home. It's all of the conversations that we never got to have with our grandparents. To me, pilgrimage means Okaeri nasai. It's our ancestors saying, welcome home.
My family was incarcerated in Arkansas and Arizona, but no one ever really talked about it. So for me, pilgrimage means telling our elders that their voices matter and we want to hear their stories.
I was born in Heart Mountain in 1944. So the pilgrimage for me was an opportunity to come full circle. It was painful and emotional at times, but fortunately I was there with my family for support, and that made all the difference in the world.
Getting to be there with her and watching her have her own embodied experience, going back to this place that is such a site of trauma, while it was super, super difficult, was, I think it was in a way healing for her, and that was healing for me.
We stood together in that field and thought about our heritage and my mom and what her life meant. And it really felt like I was more whole than I'd been before.
Unfortunately, in our world today, a lot of other people of color, particularly, are experiencing the same kinds of abuse and mistreatment that we experienced during World War II. And so it is incumbent on us to speak up, to participate in demonstrations or whatever we have to do to tell the public of today, even though 78 years has passed, that this is not right.
America needs to know the history of the internment camps, for we did not fail our country. Our country failed us, and it should never happen again.
I go on pilgrimages to mourn. I mourn those good, innocent people who died behind barbed wire due to natural causes, cancer, stroke, diabetes. I go also to mourn for those people who died behind barbed wire due to unnatural causes, who died of soul-crushing despair, of the burning fever of angst stifled, and of suffocation by the unbearable weight of oppression. I go to mourn the death of the ideals of a land of democracy, the rule of law, a justice system that rests on the pillar of due process, and the pledge to liberty and justice for all. I go on pilgrimages to remember the struggles since, to restore those noble ideals. I go on pilgrimages to hope that this young generation of Americans will continue the work, because there is much still to be done to make those ideals shine strong and true and righteous. I go on pilgrimages to mourn and remember and hope.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimiko Mar, and I'm the co-founder of Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages.
And my name is Hanako Wakatsuki. I'm the Chief of Interpretation and Education at Minadoka National Historic Site.
Hanako and I are the co-chairs of Tadaima, a community virtual pilgrimage. We came up with this idea a few months ago after we learned that all of the pilgrimages to the Japanese American confinement site had been canceled due to COVID-19.
The annual pilgrimages mean a lot to us. Kimiko and I both grew outside of the Japanese American community, so pilgrimages are important to explore our identities and find a sense of belonging. These pilgrimages mean the world to me personally because they fill my emotional bucket as they feel like a family reunion, and I look forward to them every year.
The thought of a year without a pilgrimage was unimaginable to me. So we decided to organize this virtual pilgrimage, not only to make sure that there was a pilgrimage in some capacity this year, but to allow those who are unable to attend in the past to be able to participate virtually. To us, our elders are a precious resource for the younger generations to learn from, so we couldn't afford to wait another year to have a pilgrimage.
Initially, we had considered a 10-day program that focused on the War Relocation Authority camps. But then we thought that this would be the perfect opportunity to create our ideal pilgrimage. We wanted to explore the Japanese American experience from immigration to today, and to look at the broader Nikkei incarceration around the world.
Now it's a 9-week program. It seems like a lot, but we've tried to plan it so there's something of interest for everyone. You can find scheduling information online at the Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages website.
Each of the 9 weeks focuses on a different time period in Japanese American history, while each day of the week features a different theme.
Each week will start with Sunday, also known as Community Sunday, where we'll have elder panels and a Sunday supper activity.
Next, we have Museum Mondays, which will focus on artifacts. Every Mondays will feature the 50 Objects, 50 Stories project in Curator's Corner, where you'll have the chance to see items from museum collections across the world. And Mondays will also provide a space to showcase the community archives where people at home can share family objects.
Tender Garden Tuesdays are for, you guessed it, gardening and agriculture. We'll feature farmers, archaeologists, and a vegetation ecologist from the Minadoka National Historic Site.
For Wisdom Wednesdays, we'll host education sessions based on the themes of that particular week. Throwback Thursdays will focus on Japanese Americans genealogy, where folks will have the opportunity to look up their family history in genealogy sessions. A podcast featuring history will be available as well.
Fine Arts Fridays are an opportunity to showcase both historic and contemporary artists in the community. For the readers out there, we will also be hosting a weekly book club.
And finally, Socially Distant Saturdays will feature the Nikkei block party, so we can all enjoy some live concert and performances.
What's really exciting about this program is that viewers can learn about new research and preservation efforts they might not have known about. But most importantly, the community will have a unified space to continue our healing process.
We only had about 2 months to plan this event, which is not very long at all. So we'd like to give a special shout out to our partners for all they've contributed, even when under restraints of time, a pandemic, and protest. They've shown us what the Nikkei community and our allies are capable of when we come together.
Hanako and I are so grateful to share this moment with all of you. Without further ado, we hope you have a safe and happy summer.
Rhetoric regarding the origins of coronavirus has incited violent hate crimes against Asian Americans. This widespread racism is nothing new. Years ago, our fellow Americans called us enemy. They wrote laws to obstruct our hard-earned achievements. They banned our relatives from entering the country. They imprisoned us. They tried to deport us. They even tried to strip us of our citizenship. Yet, we are here. We don't let the haters get us down. Our story is an American story. What makes us Japanese does not divide us from others. Rather, we enrich the collective American identity. Japanese immigrants were pioneers of the West. They started new lives in an unfamiliar land, building railroads and businesses. They brought sophisticated farming techniques that transformed American agriculture. And during the war, Japanese Americans showed true courage through sacrifice and resistance. Thousands of brave young men and women served in the military, while resolute resistors protested the injustice of incarceration and conscription. In the years following, Japanese Americans actively engaged to change American policy to ensure that the lessons of history would be learned and not repeated. This is the legacy we have, which we act upon to build our American future. To all the young people watching, take pride in who you are and where you come from. Be an active participant in the world. In the face of adversity, actively engage to make it better. The strength of the Nikkei community, our community, has your back. And remember that there is no singular Nikkei identity. Some of us are the children of immigrants. Some are fifth-generation Americans. Some are bilingual. A few are multilingual. And most know just English. Some of us lost our family heirloom during the war, but we never lost the spirit of our heritage. Even as an ethnic group, we come in many different creeds and colors and nationalities. When we are together, we are one. We are a vibrant human family.
Why should you worry so? You lecture me. Kusu, I laugh quietly. Hisogashi, I'm so busy. Mera, you burn bright.
That concludes our opening ceremony. In just a few minutes, we will begin a screening of two documentary films, Manzanar by Robert Nakamura and Pilgrimage by Robert's son Tad Nakamura.
But first, we would like to thank all of you for joining us, and we hope that you will enjoy all the activities and performances that will be available this summer. The Pilgrimage Committee, in cooperation with the National Park Service, has worked hard to make a seemingly impossible idea become a momentous occasion in just a matter of weeks. So thank you to our sponsors, our partners, and all of those who have provided content for making this pilgrimage a reality. If you need assistance or would like to learn more about the upcoming programs, please go online to the Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimage website for information.
And we hope that all of you watching at home are safe and healthy, regardless of where you come from or your ties to this history. We look forward to having you with us again.
Give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever and I ask you please. Don't fence me in. Turn me loose. Let me straddle my own saddle underneath the western skies. On my cayuse, let me wander, see the mountains rise. I want to ride to the ridge where the west commences, gaze at the moon until I lose my senses. Can't look at hovels and I can't stand fences. Don't fence me in. Don't fence me in. Don't fence me in.
It's very difficult to describe things in detail. I was only 6 years old, so I really can't remember anything definite. It's just vague impressions. I think I remember like feelings and smells and sounds, things that really impressed me. One incident kind of sticks in my mind was when the FBI came and took away our next door neighbor. He was very active in judo and kendo. And I used to play with his two daughters. As a matter of fact, I was at their home when the two FBI agents came by. I remember looking at them through the screen door, and then later my neighbor's wife telling me to go home. I remember that evening my dad was very, very agitated. You see, he was also very active in judo.
Oh!
We were one of the luckier families because we weren't separated. We were at least able to, when we did go to the camp, we were able to go together. Many families were separated. Second day I was there, I stepped out of our barracks and went to the bathroom, which was about 150 yards away. And as I came back, I suddenly realized I didn't know what barrack I was my folks were in. They all looked alike. They were all black tar paper barracks, and there was absolutely at that time nothing to distinguish one from another, unless you could read the numbers, which at that time I couldn't. I remember crying, and finally my dad coming out and taking me inside. After that incident, he got a piece of redwood from someplace and carved our name on it, and I couldn't really read at that time. So he put a huge index finger pointing to the name Nakamura, and I was able to find our barracks by that sign. For the most part, my folks seemed fairly cheerful. I guess they actually kind of kept up a front for my sake. Just now and then I'd kind of get an idea of how they really felt, especially my mom. One incident really sticks in my mind. The day I brought a bad report card home, and I recall she was sitting there ironing, and I showed her the report card, and she looked at me and burst into tears. Well, that really made an impression on me. Now I realize, what she was really crying about.
When I was in the Air Force station up in Anchorage, I met this black guy from Washington, D.C. named Myron Gray. And Myron Gray is the guy that really politicized me. He started to tell me about black politics. And then he said, your people were put in camp. And I looked at him, I said, what do you mean? Growing up, I knew there was a camp, but I had no idea what the camp was about, because as my parents' friends would come over, they'd always say, what block were you from? Or what camp were you in?
In every family gathering, in every meeting of a stranger that was Japanese American, it always became some kind of reference. And so it just couldn't help but be something that begged to be asked. What is this camp experience about? What is it?
I thought my mother was talking about summer camp. She talked about dances, and she talked about all of these friends she made and how she just had so much fun. People referenced it, but no one wanted to say what it was.
Even though I was in camp, I really buried the experience. I very seldom thought about it. And that was very easy because I didn't want to talk about it. My parents didn't want to talk about it. The whole Nikkei generation didn't want to talk about it. That's something to be ashamed of. It's like a prison record. I wanted to avoid that.
There was no way to find information in one place. You had to dig it up yourself. But then I also found out that it's an unpopular thing to do.
A lot of the Nisei were so angry. Why are you digging up this old story that it's better left buried? I kept wondering, if it wasn't that important and people didn't want to look at it, then why are they getting so mad at me when I brought it up?
The Vietnam War was happening and the civil rights movement was really going on. You saw things happening on TV every day.
This concept started to really anchor me. Who was I?
I had a good business as a commercial photographer. Money was not a problem. Yet basically, I had this dissatisfaction, what am I doing with my life? Where do I belong?
Just like people no longer were Negroes and started to become Black, I felt the same challenge that I needed to define what I was rather than live up to someone else's definition.
We knew one thing for sure, right, that we had to reclaim our own history. In fact, that's when, we decided that we were Asian rather than Oriental.
Things were starting all over the country simultaneously, and we figured we got to march somewhere. We just got to march somewhere, but we don't know where to march to. It's got to have some symbolic political essence to it. But what about this camp thing that we keep hearing about? Why don't we march to one of the camps? And the camp we hear is the closest we're going to march to Manzanar.
And then we just talked about it a little bit, and we decided, well, we don't even know where Manzanar is. Let's go check it out.
So we drove up there, and we're going toward the Sierra Nevada mountains on a clear autumn day. And it's just magnificent.
And all of a sudden, you see this white monument, out in the middle of nowhere.
Like a beacon, just bam.
And then as you drive up on it, it has Japanese writing on it.
We were walking around and just trying to visualize and wondering and thinking. And about 100 yards out, we come onto this dump.
It was like a discovery, like we had just found ruins of something. Marching from LA to Manzanar was the original idea. And it was, that's a long ride.
It was Victor that came up with the term pilgrimage, a journey back, paying our respects.
I think it was 1969.
And I went to UCLA for something. And the people there, the young staff people there, were saying, how about going to Manzanar with us?
I thought, well, this is perfect. We're always talking about these camps. I had been doing a lot of research on my own about camps. It was this whole movement of people, we're going to go, and this is going to be a whole new experience, because camp then was a new, fresh story.
Shit, we just said, let's do it. Set a date, and we all went up there.
The idea of going up there didn't seem like a big deal. We're going to just go up there and take a look at it, and it'll be kind of nostalgic.
Just like with the Holocaust, some people said, oh, that didn't happen, or it wasn't that bad. That was the other reason why I wanted to go to Manzanar, because I wanted to know, well, what was it?
When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, our west coast became a potential combat zone. Living in that zone were more than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry, 2/3 of them American citizens. Military authorities therefore determined that all of them would have to move. The evacuees cooperated wholeheartedly. The Army provided housing where they would have an opportunity to work and more space in which to live. Naturally, the newcomers looked about with some curiosity. They were in a new area, on land that was raw, untamed, but full of opportunity.
The coldness there, the isolation. And then you see the condition. This is desolate, this is depressing. I didn't see any beauty there.
We start the ceremony. That's when I launch into my speech, and that's what I said. People ask me, how many people are buried here? And I said, a whole generation. And they say we're reveling in the fact that they were seen as the quiet Americans. So I'm saying, oh, if you're that quiet, you're dead, because they had terrorized you into being silent.
It really affected us more than we really thought.
It unlocked what I had buried, because now all of a sudden I remember everything.
Oh, can't anybody see? We've got a war to fight. Never find our way, regardless of what they say. How can it feel this wrong? From this moment, how can it feel this wrong? From this moment, how can it feel this wrong? Storm in the morning, feel no more can say. Frozen to myself.
I was not only coming back to Manzanar, But I think being with all these people, it is the first time I felt I belonged to a community.
You didn't have to say anything. I think we all felt it. This is reality now. It's not a secret. And so we have the burden of what do we do with this now?
In the ocean oysters, oh, beneath the sea. Open one and you might find deep in one a different mind. One who looks like me. In Rome, the Senate chamber rang. Victory was the goal.
Manzanar became a symbol that started to really be a focal point for looking at political issues.
People were doing social investigation or their own life experience was telling them, hey man, something's got to be done about these problems. So they got into it and started working on them. We had all these spontaneous programs and things happening, right?
Every single moment there was something happening.
All of a sudden it turns a little light bulb, serving the people. That was a whole new concept to me.
We were hooking up with our history, we were honoring our community. We were beginning to feel positive about who we were.
We are the yellow pearl. We are half the world. And we are half the world.
It just turned things around for me. Made me stop and say, what kind of a society are we living in and what do I want to do about it?
And time is telling only how long it takes, layer after layer, as our beauty unfolds, until our captor we'll hold in peril. Rain, a tiny grain of sand.
A candlelight vigil tonight in Little Tokyo to remember those killed in the terrorist attacks. More than 100 people gathered in front of the Japanese American National Museum tonight. In addition to mourning those lost, they spoke of the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. They expressed support for members of the Muslim and Arab communities, some of whom have become targets of hate crimes since the September 11th attacks.
When I woke up and watched the towers burning down, I knew exactly how an Arab American or a Muslim must feel. It's patriotism, but it's also bonding together against the enemy. And if you look like the enemy, you're in trouble.
You automatically are suspect. And as a result of that, you lose constitutional rights, you lose legal rights, civil rights, then you start losing human rights.
You have to imagine yourself being a normal person and then in one day being the enemy.
It's great to say, we ain't gonna never let it happen again, and then don't say shit when all this stuff is going on. That's crap.
If we know the experience and know what happened to us, then we have the responsibility to stand up for those right now.
There is a connection between the Manzanar from before and the Manzanar today, but I think it goes beyond that. Our vision is much broader.
I think that I'm not learning about the history of another community. I'm really learning about my past, and I'm learning about my history.
Right now we're standing on native land, and there was a huge amount of bloodshed here in California to remove the native people from their territories, and it's important to learn that side and also how Japanese people were incarcerated just for their ethnic identities.
What Manzanar is about is looking at what took place and why Japanese were put in camp was why a lot of things were happening then and even happening today.
when you see other people relating to your struggle, it just feels really good. It feels like you have somebody that has your back.
Everyone that, goes on and comes back, we feel like, hey, we need to do something. It helps us continue to fight in our own struggles.
I think that's when I really fessed up to myself when I came back on that first pilgrimage that this was not right. And I'm not going to let anyone forget it.
History is made by believing in something. And if you ain't into believing that you got to make this place a better world to live in, then nowhere in hell you can understand what motivated us.
When we go back home, the pilgrimage isn't over. That's when the pilgrimage really starts. That's when people need to start taking action. That's exactly why I think the first pilgrimage was so important. And I think that's exactly why this pilgrimage today is so important. It's rekindling that notion that, no, we actually make history.
Knowing that Asian Americans were putting it down and fighting, that's what's empowering. Because you see people that look like you, of course it makes you feel like, yeah, well, we gotta fight.
People still broke, people still homeless, while we walk by and act like we don't notice. Young brothers go to war to protect their country, then return to the hood with hardly any money. Mothers burn candles, say a prayer for peace. A family says grace and prepares to eat, while overseas bombs dropping in the Middle East. Covered my ears when I heard Bush give a speech. Whatever happened to our logic? Most of my friends don't even have a strong opinion on it. My mother begs me to stay away from all the protests. Iraqi children remind me to stay focused. I feel hopeless at the same time I feel strengthened. Imagine if we just got people to start thinking, got people to stop talking and start doing, and come together to start this next movement. Imagine.
That's why the camps is important, is that they remind people, hey, look here, that may have been the past, but it's still going on, and what the hell do you got to say for that?
What if we stood up and fought for peace? Took the cities and blocked the streets with the voice that would rock the beat. Imagine what this world would be like.
Ha, 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 ha. 1, 2, y'all. 1, 2, y'all. I check it. 1, 2, y'all. It goes microphone check. 1, 2, y'all. The horn microphone check. 1, 2, 1. It's the cornerstone. From the gutter to the throne, corner to the stone. Camaraderie is earned, cultivated, and homegrown. Don't really own a damn thing except for my labor and maybe a couple of 1,000 pages of my rhymes. And your brain's just a cage with a mind locked inside it unless knowledge itself gives proper perspective to see how the politicians keep the dollars protected. My namesake is not confined to scholarly methods to reach the mass. Never preach the way they teach in class. Sleepwalking, half-dead spirits leaving fast. If you never had your ass beat, right, you can't speak about nonviolent protests and other such mythology. Watch how the quantity leaks into quality deep beyond the reaches of your Babylon economy. I speak solemnly, I seek equality. My people celebrate life despite poverty. Fuck the false prophecy, promising we'll all be free as long as we fall in line with the flawed philosophy of mystery. God's eternal afterlife's in heaven while living in hell, where the militant dwell. Now the ranks start to swell in the hoods and jail cells. Lock down the campus cause it's right to rebel. No uprising fails. Each one's a step forward toward the victory and at the end of the trail. We crack jokes while singing the blues and rock like a stone that the builder refused. To all area crew who carry the world on the shoulders on some atlas shit. This one's for you, 206. Rock on. the proletariat, rock on. Beacon Hill, rock on. Now the hustle on the corner set the struggle in stone. My compatriots and comrades engaging in combat, trying to stay sane up in this land gone mad. Give me 2 bucks, you take a puff and pass my bomb back. Nearly 3 years and they're still up in Baghdad. Battle raps, 85%, talking this and that. Quit that, insecure petty little man. Get a manicure and tan, be amateurish candy rap. It's hilarious, I'm laughing till I can't breathe. Can it be that it was never simple then or now? Consumers waiting for a magazine to set the style. The critical instead begin to organize quietly underneath the sugar-coated surface of society. My purpose as of now is serve the people to the fullest, knowing that my name is somewhere written on a bullet. The beast that I inherited and rhymes in my chromosomes passed to my seed. I call him my cornerstone. We crack jokes while singing the blues and rock like a stone that the builder refused. To all area crew who carry the world on their shoulders on some atmosphere. This one's for you, new people, y'all. Rock on. Real change, man. Rock on. The next generation. Rock on. Now the hustle on the corner set the struggle in stone. We crack jokes while singing the blues and rock like the stone that the builder refused. To all area crew who carry the world on their shoulders on some atmosphere. This one's for you, Central District. Rock on. U District, rock on. International District, rock on. Now the hustle on the corner set the struggle in stone. B-Town, rock on. White City, y'all, rock on. Bellingham, y'all, rock on. Tacoma, y'all, rock on.